Folks are still gathering here, Lynn.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. We now have a quorum, so I think we're going to get started in a couple of seconds.
Okay, I actually had to step away for a moment, Ruben.
Do what you got to do. I will. Well, you should. I don't know.
Yeah, if I miss attendance, maybe I can
If you want to
come
step away
back.
for a minute, go ahead and do that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Melina, I'm going to switch it over right now. Give me a second. We have not started yet. Revere TV, we're going to start.
Welcome. Good afternoon, commissioners, and good afternoon, those who are joining us. Today is Thursday, October 7th. It is 5 o'clock Eastern Time, And this is the monthly meeting of the Revere Human Rights Commission. We meet on the first Thursday of every month, either in the council chambers or remotely via Zoom. We'll begin by doing a roll call of commissioners. So please unmute yourself when I call you. Lynn Alexis. Lynn is present on Zoom, but we'll wait for her to chime in at the end. Chief Wright.
Present.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Chief Callahan is not here at the moment. Dr. Garcia.
Present.
Thank you. Actually, correct me, let the record reflect Chief Callahan just walked in. You're the second seat from the end, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Vice Chair Shema Hosseini will be coming in a few minutes, so we'll check back. Rashid Mukabir.
Present.
Thank you. Okay. Karu Pish.
Present.
Thank you. Kathy Reinstein.
Present.
Thank you. And I am Janine Grillo-Mara, the chair. I'm present. And Lynn Alexis, can you just say hello and that you're here via Zoom?
Present via Zoom. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay. Okay. Oh, I don't know how I always do this. I'm so sorry. Reverend Timothy Bogertman.
Present.
It is not because any of you are any less important than another. I feel like every meeting I always overlook, and it's always in the B's. It's always somewhere in the stars. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And so, as the group knows, and in case you're not aware, those of you watching, that we usually start our meetings with a few minutes of simply arriving and settling. And the reason we do this is because our lives tend to be very busy and fast-paced. And if we don't take the time to pause and slow down, drop sort of down and in, then we're really just relating to one another purely from our thoughts and ideas. And we're trying to relate to one another more from an embodied place and an open-hearted place. So that's our intention when we start like this. So if you'd like to join, just find a comfortable way to sit or even stand. Just, if it's helpful for you, you might take some deep breaths. You can even let out a loud or soft or internal just an invitation to just let go and let be. And it's up to you. If it's more comfortable for your eyes to be closed, that's fine, if that feels safer. Or you can have your eyes be open, but you can give your gaze a rest. You don't have to focus on anything. You can just have a very wide view, a wide lens. And to help us ground, I'll suggest a breathing exercise, which you can follow or not. So just imagine as you take a breath in that the inhale is coming down the crown, the top of your head, down along the front of your spine, all the way down to the pelvic area, the butt area where you're contacting the chair. And when you exhale, it's like you're just letting go any places where we're feeling a little bit stuck, a little bit overly involved. So inhaling down the front of the spine, and then exhaling, just allowing the attention to just gently rest in the belly area, to just let go, let be. Now bring to mind something that makes you feel happy and relaxed, whether that's a person or a pet or a place in nature. Just something that's happy to recall. Might give you a sense of an inner smile. Not to ignore or pretend or cover over, but to make space for whatever is arising, whatever unfolds. And now I'll ask each of the commissioners, unless you're on Zoom, only because of logistical, technical reasons, I'll ask each of the commissioners to unmute and we'll state our mission statement together. I'll ask Mr. Cantor if he could screen share it, so if anybody else wants to read it along, Lynn, please read along even though you're muted. The mission of the Human Rights Commission is to promote human and civil rights and empower all people of Revere by ensuring that everyone, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized, have equitable opportunities, equal access, and are treated with dignity, respect, fairness, and justice. Thank you all. Next on the agenda is for us to approve the minutes from our monthly September 2nd meeting. Please speak if you have any proposed edits or clarifications. And if not, then I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
And Lynn? Aye.
Hi, thank you.
All in favor? Yeah. Okay. The next agenda item, our Vice Chair Shema was going to give an update, but I will, since she's not here. At the last meeting, we discussed the HRC Resources webpage project, and we mostly discussed the Google form as a way to submit resources. And we basically just wanted to let you know, we took any input from last meeting. There were some categories that we added: disability, ableism, religion, spirituality. Also, in the meantime, Dr. Garcia had shared some September 11 resources that we're going to add those to the spreadsheet, as well as the resource on implicit bias. So Vice Chair Shema has continued to just gather those, and since it looks like we will have a director in place very soon, we'll have a much fuller discussion of how we might use the resources, how we will approve the resources, what they'll look like on a web page. So we didn't feel it was really appropriate to have a full discussion now, since we have a director coming on board, and this is really just to give you an update of where we're at with that. Okay. So Vice Chair Shema and I wanted to try a slightly different way of communicating in our meetings, see how it goes. Hopefully it won't be too confusing. And instead of she or I calling on each person to speak, because each of you will have an opportunity to speak on the next few topics, instead of us calling on you, I may start, and then I'll hand it to someone. If you're not ready to speak, you can just pass. We'll come back to you. If you are, you'll speak, and then it's up to you to hand it to somebody else. So you have to be attentive, to who hasn't spoken. And it's also a way for, instead of one of us having to be selecting, it feels a bit more like it's a group process. So if it's too confusing and complex, we can always abandon it, but let's see how it goes, okay? So the first topic of discussion is our recent anti-racism and anti-oppression training. This group, all of us here, Lynn Alexis, who's on Zoom, and Vice Chair Shema, we participated in a two-day, full-day, 9 to 5 training last week, and it was really powerful and deep. And I'm asking each commissioner to share a brief takeaway. We don't want to divulge any, intimate, confidential details. There's also a press release that's going out on this, but at least to hear from each of you for a brief takeaway. So I'll begin and say that what I found really helpful was that this kind of work is not about taking a marginalized group and moving them into a dominant group. It's not about taking away from one group and giving to another. It's really moving from this model of scarcity and not enoughness into more of a model of trust and belonging and community. So that was a big takeaway for me, that it was presented, this work, in a very compassionate, communal way. So I'll now hand it to Reverend Timothy Bogertman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I found the same way, I appreciated the share there. I found this training to be excellent. It was very well done and presented to us in such a way as challenging us of how to work together. My takeaways was, one, how we can work together towards this. Understanding each other's stories and hearing from each other was essential about how we approach these issues and work together to bring that about. There was a lot of challenge that was issued to us. Also, what is our role to promote each other and to work towards what we have, where there is oppression, how do we respond? What is each one of our roles together and how we work together to do so? Hearing from each one of you, too, was, I think, essential. We have had not as much time to be together, to learn and understand each other's stories and how to respond to that. And also, how I can respond myself. What is my role as a white male to respond to these issues too? How do I respond in such a way that is caring, responding, listening, and understanding? And as you said, a model of not just scarcity anymore, but the diversity of what we can all have in this community in Revere, and what it can be and what we can work towards together. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm going to pass it to Karu for next.
I was hoping you pass it to someone else. Thank you, Reverend and Madam Chair. I think the training was very, very helpful. It helped us create a foundation of understanding why we are here together. What is our purpose for doing this work? It was great, and it was a great opportunity for all of us to be together and learning from one another and sharing our stories. And we hope that we can share that story and hear story from the community as well. Thank you. And I will pick Chief Callahan.
Karu, thank you very much. I just want to say the training was a very good opportunity for the commission to bond with one another. And due to some challenges with COVID and other things, we haven't had a lot of in-person training able to work together. And those 2 days, we spent a lot of time, and there were some challenges. We got to learn about one another. We got to learn about other issues and how to bond. And I believe it's going to make the group more cohesive, and it's going to give us some more trust and legitimacy in the community, and that we can bond better with everyone and have a better understanding. And especially as my role as the chief of police, I think the commissioners were able to see a different side of me And we were able to have some nice, fruitful conversations and discussions on some of the challenging issues that we have to deal with in the community and in society in whole. And again, I just want to thank everyone for how wonderful the training was, and that everyone got along. And we were able to speak together, work together, and share stories that we have a lot of things in common that people don't realize. Thank you. I will pass it to Chief Bright.
Thank you, Chief Callahan. I thought the training was fantastic. It was a great opportunity for all the commissioners to finally get together and spend some time together after a real difficult year on Zoom, trying to kick off this committee. And I think we all, I mean, I know I really enjoyed getting to know everybody a little bit more. I think it will bond us for the work, the important work we have ahead of us. And I think we hopefully, I'd like to echo Janine's statement about the belonging sense. You know, there's a lot of stuff we learned about making everyone feel, you know, like they belong, and that's very important. And so I thought the training was fantastic, and it really brought us together, and I look forward to the year ahead, the stuff we have to do. So, thank you. And I think I'll pass it to my friend Rashid.
Thank you so much. Excuse me, Rashid, I just would like the record to reflect that Vice Chair Shema Hosani has now arrived. Go ahead, Rashid. And let's also not forget Lynn Alexis is here on Zoom.
Thank you so much, Chief Bright. And I just want to thank the city for paying for this training, and I want to thank also Janine for her hard work to make this happen. It was a lot of collaboration, a lot of planning involved. The food was great. Thank you so much, Janine. Great choice. And definitely was very helpful training. We got a chance to sit down together, listen to each other, talk to each other, and they found that training will be very, very helpful for us to get our mission to work. And definitely it's not a one-time training. This is going to be ongoing, and we can't do all that stuff that we learned. We cannot apply it unless we have to work with different departments in the city, with the business department, with the mayor's office, with the city councilors. This is going to be, the whole city should be mobilized to empower our people. A lot of people, they can't even afford, we are not talking about access to the power, they can't even afford being in the city, you know? So I think it's a great training, and it shows how those people that are very close to the power and how we can empower other people. And they believe the only way is to by educating our people by giving them access to good jobs, you know, like all of that stuff that we see, housing, food assistance, those are short-term solutions to what we have right now. But a long-term solution is to help those people get access to good jobs and increase their income. Thank you.
Would you like to pass it to Rashid?
I'll pass it to Kathy.
Thank you, Rashid. You didn't, just because I reminded you, didn't mean you'd have to send it to me. Thank you. I just really want to say thank you to you, Chair Mara, and, you know, to the mayor and to the city for resurrecting this commission. I think it's really necessary. And I'm very, very honored to serve on the commission, and even am more honored and more maybe resolved to really spend the time doing the work, because I think it's very important. And I've really enjoyed spending time with all of you. I think all of us are so busy. We never have time to spend time with anyone, right? We're always running to, I mean, especially, you know, I think of both you, Chief Bright and Chief Callahan. I mean, you're everywhere all the time. It's a lot. But it was great, and there was just such a real camaraderie and a real sense of mission. And, you know, like I said, we need this commission. This is a group of people who all truly, truly, truly love this community and have had different experiences, some very good and some very bad. And it was really an honor to share space with you, and I really look forward to continuing the work together. So thank you all very much. And I'm gonna pass it to Lynn Alexis.
Thank you, Kathy. I just echo what everyone has said, and also don't want to miss the opportunity to thank the mayor and the city for allowing us to partake in this necessary training. I'm just so grateful for each voice that's represented here, and the work that we seek to do for every voice in the city. All human and all civil rights, that we hold those issues so dear to our hearts. So I'm just grateful for everyone taking the time and dedicating it to this in order to seek to make you know, our city and our world better for everyone. And I want to say that at the core of who we are as humans, there is no dominance, and there is no marginalized beings. I think that along the way, there's been, you know, a construct maybe of that. And I think working to understand what those are and how they show up is incredibly powerful. But at the end of the day, I think my biggest takeaway from the training is how at our core, we're all just people. And how would it be if we show up, you know, welcoming and allowing everyone to belong just as they are. So I'm just incredibly grateful for the work that we're doing, pushing forward. Thank you.
Who would you like to pass it to? We have 2 members remaining.
I haven't heard from Vice Chair Shea, so let's pass it to her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn Alexis. I would just basically want to say the same thing. Like, I want to echo everything that people have said thus far. Additionally, when Chairperson Janine mentioned and brought up the training in the first place, I was elated because that means that we wanted, like, especially when everyone was on board about it, like doing the training. It means that, like, hey, you know, I want to learn and I want to improve on who I am as a person and how we can move forward as a commission overall. And I feel like unfortunately, that's the obstacle that a lot of the commissions that the city has a hard time doing, is that, oh yeah, we have some sort of issue, and that doing trainings like these will help us get over that issue, especially within the commission, not even like the problems that the commission faces. So like the fact that we admitted to be like, okay, so we need to get closer as a committee, and how can we move forward from this, I think is a really good step on how the future of the HRC is going to go. Moving on from that, like, I love the training overall. The fact that I got to see my commission members outside of the HRC, like outside of everything, and just like be in a space to be comfortable and vulnerable with each other is amazing. You don't tend to see that a lot, especially within the committees in Revere. And, you know, emphasizing that point, I would love to see other communities go through the same training that we did, because we found, although like we say that like we advocate for so many things, obviously there's some things that we could work out within a commission. So that, just saying that about us as an HRC can say a lot about the other committees, so other commissions, other committees. So I definitely strongly advise for other committees to do the same thing. But overall, I think it was an amazing experience, you know, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I would do it again if I if I wanted to. Well, so thank you very much. Oh, okay, word. I'm gonna pass it to my boy, Dr. Garcia.
Do I have a choice?
Perhaps.
I think I was very happy with the training. If we look at our mission statement, all aspects of the training target those elements. And it's pretty much aligned with the training. When you talk about marginalized and vulnerable populations, you know, equitable opportunities for everyone, access, resources, treatment, the training was pretty much aligned. It's like the stars were directly aligned with all the rest of the constellation. You know, one of the things I really enjoy about the training is that sometimes we make a lot of assumptions about people, and those assumptions sometimes turn out to be false. And it gave us an opportunity to look into our souls and reflect and see that ultimately there are a lot of things that unite us. We are people after all. We have different experiences, perspectives, and backgrounds, and that's all shaped by places where we have been and places where we were born and raised. And that makes you know, a diversity that unites us as a diverse group. So if you look at the configuration and the demographics of our city, that's exactly what we have. Look at us around this table. You have people that are, you know, from Asian descent, African, you know, people were born and raised in this country, and the training certainly brought that perspective. It was a joy interacting with all of you. I even earned an acronym during the training, which was great. Great food, great conversations, deep conversations about race, systems of oppression, and things like that. It was really, really, you know, I really enjoyed it. And our next task would be to continue to be trained, to receive additional support, and really do the work that we have been tasked with, which is basically ensuring that we defend and advocate for those who don't have a voice in our community, those who day in and out, they struggle to put food on the table, the housing, education, everything. So I think that it's our job. I think we have the right know-how, the right capacity, and we have the right people to do this work. And we invite the public. There is always this misperception about our role and responsibilities. We really invite the public to join us in this fight against injustices and this fight against, you know, discrimination, other types of things that we see, not just in Revere, but across our country. So that's our job, our duty to do that. So I just want to thank Madam Chair, my colleagues, my other commissioners, and also the Planning Committee for really working with the training providers, providing guidance, direction, support, and to put this training together. Thank you. I look forward to more training so that we can improve our city and you know, can improve the dynamics and the relationship that we have among all staff and our committee members.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia, and thank you for mentioning the Planning Committee, because Vice Chair Shema Hosseini, Dr. Garcia, and Karu Pish worked with me to work with the facilitators, and that was extra time and energy. So thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Garcia. Okay. The next topic is the HRC and Revere TV collaboration. This is in the very, very initial stages. So at this point, I wanted to give this commission an update and get some input on some broad strokes. So I'll briefly give you an update. Bob Dunbar, who's the director of Revere TV, was really impressed at our August meeting when Sergeant Turner came and gave the presentation on the updated use of force policy and the discussion that came around that. And he had approached me and Chief Callahan about continuing these conversations, and then he and I met basically to talk about the HRC could maybe have a monthly show on Revere TV, so that outside of these meetings where we have other agenda items in business, we could maybe have a monthly show. In the format and the logistics are really to be determined down the road. But the broad strokes of it are that we would pick certain topics, maybe spend a month or 2 or 3 on a topic. So let's say we started with policing. I had a follow-up conversation with Sergeant Turner, who was very enthusiastic and receptive, that the suggestion was we talk about scenarios. Someone gets stopped at a traffic light. What's happening from the public's perspective? What's happening from the police perspective? Someone gets called, domestic violence call. So he loved the idea of teaching in that kind of situation scenario basis. We'd have to figure out how to have the public involved and be able to call in or ask questions. We might do, say then, that could last 1 or 2 or 3 months, depending on how much we milk out that topic. We might go on to, I'm just off the top of my head, healthcare and the equity in healthcare, and we might have guest speakers, maybe Dr. Kong or someone else. So what we're looking for from this group now, if you feel that this big picture idea seems something like appealing, we're not looking for the logistics of who would host it, which commissioners are interested. We're really looking at this point on what topics are important that we should look at if we're coursing this out over, say, the 2022 calendar, starting in the first quarter. We thought of police, healthcare, but we're going to go around in the same way. And basically, we're asking, are there any other topics, some of the broad strokes that you'd like to add in this conversation? So I will hand this to Vice Chair Shema Hosseini.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially we're giving suggestions of what we could talk about.
I'm asking at this point not to get into the logistics, but suggestions of what would be the topics that we would like to spend 1, 2, or 3 months on with certain guest speakers on this monthly Revere TV show, or whatever we decided, every other month. Those are the details. We're looking now at what topics would be important for us to think about.
Honestly, off the top of my head, it's either the education system in Revere and gentrification. I think those are 2 big ones that I can think of right now, but I can't think of anything else. I'm going to pass it to Kuru.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm also thinking about housing in Revere and storytelling as well. Those are the 2. And I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Garcia.
I would say that, the first thing we have to talk about is we have to build, in my view, I think we have to build an understanding of what this commission is all about. So I think the first thing we have to do is really talk about our role in the community, the role of the Human Rights Commission in Revere. What Yes, we have a, mission statement, but we got a lot of words there. We have to take into account the audience of our city. And we really need to do, if we do it, certainly, these will, first of all, will have to be done. We need to have interpreters to translate for those who don't understand English. And it needs to be done in a way that it's meaningful and people understand what we're saying. So the second thing I would recommend for us to do is really, for example, do a training on cultural responsive practice or cultural competency. What is that? Cultural, okay, the second topic I would propose would be a topic centered on cultural understanding or cultural responsive practice. That entails understanding people, where they're coming from, their culture, their identities, their history, experience, and so on and so forth. I think that's important in the sense that, I'm looking at the data from the census that we just got. It's very telling, that data. So it's important for us to do that so that we understand when somebody shows up at the city hall, we know how to deal and interact with a person. When somebody shows up in our school system, we have somebody that's well-trained, articulate, knows how really to approach the parent. So I think that's important for our city. Just those two for now.
Could you pass it, hand it off?
Pass it to Rashid.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia. I think all topics will be great to talk about them because, everything is touching people's lives. If we got to talk about education or about the school system, why don't we talk about the city hall? Why don't we talk about the police department? Why don't we talk about this? But people, whenever they feel that they are discriminated against, they can bring that topic, be open about it, and whether we like it or not, we have to be brave and courageous to discuss it and get to the bottom of it. But more importantly, we need to hear from the people because there are plenty of topics, but we want to see what it's impacting our people the most. If we can have maybe a post on Facebook or on social media, and we need to hear from people. We can't, if there is everything fine in the city, so why should we do in this commission? So we need to hear from them what's impacting them the most. Thank you. I'll pass it to Tim.
Thank you, Rashid. Yeah, so as I was thinking about this, I think Karu mentioned storytelling. I want to drill down on that a little further too. Revere is ever changing, ever the same. It is a city of immigrants and always has been. And there are parts of our story we have not told, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think it would be important, part of this could be to tell that story. What has not been told in our history that has happened in the last 50, 60, 100 years that has been forgotten, and even last 20, 30, what has been forgotten, what have we not told that we need to tell, and have people share their stories, partly to understand what the wrongs and the hurts that have been done for healing to begin, but also for us to know and acknowledge what has happened in our history. There's a lot of good to celebrate about Revere, but there's also these parts of our stories that weren't even in the papers that need to be told, and to make this part of us sharing that story so that we can begin that process of healing and moving forward as a city. So I think part of it is really having those stories told, to be known, and to be able to move forward, and that means acknowledgement and understanding, and that way we're putting forward something that has happened that we have not addressed. So I think that would be really important. And I'd like to pass it to Kathy.
Thank you, Reverend. I totally agree with you on that. I think, how we learn and how we realize that there's a lot more that we agree upon than we disagree upon is when we hear the stories. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, too, to even bridge on that a little more, maybe even working with the Revere Society of Culture and Historical Preservation, and working with them to do it. And, you know, obviously, we have to thank them too, because they let us use their space last week for 2 days too. And I think, you know, not only we know we've been working with them to get different things in the museum that represents more cultures for the city, but also we could put that on TV too, and I think that would be awesome. I also think, you know, maybe a faith-based conversation would be really great. And I figured you would say this, Rev, so I'm just kind of stealing it from you. I think if you could get like a bunch of different faith-based leaders to talk about what unites everybody, I think would be really huge to see in our city. I think that that would be excellent. And I think one thing that's going to be really good about this when it comes to fruition is that, just like this commission, we're going to see people who come from different backgrounds and maybe have different religions and maybe come from different areas having civil conversations with one another. And I think that's the mission, that's part of the mission of, and the purpose of this commission, and I think the purpose of putting this on TV is to kind of return civility a little bit back. So I'm really looking forward and am willing to help in any way. And I will pass it to Lynn Alexis.
Thank you, Kathy. I jotted down some notes, and literally what I wrote down is essentially what you said. Along with the topics that each of you mentioned, I think that that would be great for discussion, but my thing was to also include a faith-based healing resources type of discussion where the people of Revere can call in and get some guidance, and you know, it could be like a question answer format. We do a lot of work at the systemic level, at the policy level, but I don't want to miss, and like Kathy said, I think this really ties into what we do. I don't want to miss the human aspect of it. So giving people resources for them to heal, you know, if they are victims of, you know, marginalization or any topics that can really come about with what we do as commissioners, just giving that outlet to kind of talk and to be heard and to be understood and to be championed and supported, I think is incredibly helpful.
Who would you like to pass it to, Lynn?
It's getting tricky. Madam Chair, I don't think I heard you. Oh, yes, I did. You started it. Okay. Let's see. Chiefs. Okay, let's hear from Chief Callahan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. A couple of things that the fellow commissioners have mentioned. The storytelling, I think, is very important. And this community has been a community of immigrants for many, many years. And there's a lot of wonderful stories that have come out of this community that seem not to be told. You hear a lot of the negative things, the not so pretty things, but there's a lot of wonderful, beautiful things, how people have bonded and worked together in this community, but you just don't hear about it. That's what needs to be told. We need to hear more positive things and how people get along. And the other thing I think is important, that we put it out there how the city government works. I think the city has become so diverse, and it's very challenging for people from other cultures to navigate city services. And I almost at times feel like I'm the ambassador if I'm around City Hall or somewhere in the area, and you have people that come and they just don't understand how to resolve a problem or what to do, where to go, what office, who can help me. And I mean, I find it pleasurable to be able to assist somebody or walk them to a certain city office so they could get some service or get assistance. And I think that's something I think we can really talk about and get it out there in the community, or at least give someone an idea where to go to get a particular answer. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my brother, Chief Bright.
Thank you, Chief Callahan. I concur with all my fellow commissioners, great ideas for topics for our Revere TV HRC show. It's a great opportunity for us, I think, to put these things out there, and I think the storytelling will be very strong. And just listening to people in the community, you know, from different groups about their experiences here. I think that'll be very powerful. And again, when we get a director in place, we can introduce him to the city even through that show. That might be a great platform for him to participate in, I think. So I think it's very exciting. I see some of the great work Revere TV does, and I think this will be a great platform for us to utilize. Excited about it. Thank you.
If I may, him or her, or them, the director.
Them.
Can we go on? Does that feel complete? So the next topic is the Pledge of Allegiance. To give people a bit of a history, both the commission members as well as those in the community, we've had a couple of inquiries from the community of why we do not state the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of our meetings. To give you a little bit of background, it is not a mandate from the mayor or city hall that boards or commissions need to start with the pledge. Not every board starts with the Pledge of Allegiance, and some boards, it may even be a bit inconsistent with them starting with it. The decision is actually at the discretion of the chair, so in this case, it would be me. I could just make this decision of how to structure the meetings. I feel this is a sensitive topic, and so I'm not drawn to make a unilateral dictator kind of decision. This might require some further conversation. Eventually, it might require some voting, but I thought for the first step, I wanted to share my sort of initial thoughts and then hear from each of you about this topic. I don't have a strong feeling. The things that I was concerned about is that the words in the Pledge of Allegiance, they do not separate church and state, so the word God is in the Pledge of Allegiance. And for those that do not believe in God, or that's not what resonates for them religiously and spiritually, I wonder if that gives a message of inclusion or not. There's also the words liberty and justice for all, even though that's the intention. There may be those that do not feel that that is the case. One last thing, and this is a very personal observation. Sometimes it feels rote and mechanical, and I'm not drawn to do things that are rote and mechanical. For me, it's more important to do something that's substantive and qualitative than to just do something for the sake of doing something. But I am sort of open. This is the first step. I won't be asking for any votes on this yet. I think we'd also like to get the director's input. But for this evening, I thought that we'd start with just your thoughts on this, if you choose to speak. And so I'll hand this to Lynn Alexis.
I appreciate your thoughts, Madam Chair, and I think that that's probably consistent with a lot of thoughts that other individuals may have. I'm okay with the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know that it's a necessary mandate. You know, at the alternative, we can make it voluntary for those who choose to partake. I maybe question the desire to mandate it. Those are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Lynn, so you have to hand it off, and I just want to clarify that the mayor does not wish to mandate this. So that's sort of, I've already checked with that, so there is no mandate on it, in case I wasn't clear.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I agree with what the pledge says. I also agree with the sentiments that you presented. So let's pass it off to Chief Bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Again, a little conflicted about it. You know, we're brought up saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and it's very much ingrained in you during your, I think, your formative years, through your school years, and so on and so forth. So, to me, it was kind of a normal thing, but I do understand, I mean, you know, the separation of church and state and how, you know, some people could have a problem with that. So I think it is something we need to discuss and make a decision on at some point. Again, this is a difficult decision, but I don't think it should be mistaken if people don't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance that they're not American, you know, they're un-American or something like that. Because I do understand people could have an objection to that word. So those are my thoughts. Thank you. And let's see, I'd like to hand it off to Carew.
Thank you, Chief Bright. Thank you, Madam Chair, for starting this conversation. And I also agree with the Madam Chair about some languages might not be responsive to certain people. And also, it's not an issue, and it's just how people feel. And we're talking about a sense of belonging a lot. And some of those words doesn't belong to certain group. And I feel that this group, I mean, our group as commissioner, it's our job to make sure that whatever we do, we are responsive to every voice in our community. I would like to take time to really have more conversation, a deeper conversation about this. I know it's created for many, many years, and also a lot of things has changed as well. I want to respect that, and especially for the younger generation, and I would love to hear from them as much as others' generations. Thank you. I will pass it on to Kathy.
Thank you, Carew. I really agree with all of the commissioners gone before me, and Chief Wright, you really, I have the same exact sentiments. I think, you know, for me, I am a proponent of the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, I had a room in our house that was all red, white, and blue. So, I mean, you know, it's really ingrained. But I think, too, like, I take those words to heart, and especially ones that say liberty and justice for all. And that makes me also know and realize that that really hasn't been the case. If we look at the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, we are continuing to amend those things to create rights and open the door for more people. So I understand if there are people who don't feel that that applies to them. But just like you said, Chief Wright, I don't think that someone should be judged or penalized or canceled if they don't, it doesn't make them less of an American, of a patriotic person, of a person who's proud to be from here. So I agree, and I am grateful for the conversation. I will pass it to Shay.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I would like to start by saying something very bold. And that is, I just feel like we should change the Pledge of Allegiance in general, but that's a topic for a different day. aside from that, I agree with everyone is saying. From the religious aspect, as a Muslim, I'm just like, I don't pledge allegiance to anyone except my own personal God. That's like, especially for the people who are religious in this city. What is it called? That don't identify God as God. Like, I identify God as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Additionally, something that's been echoed with from my fellow commission members is like, those words, justice for all. Obviously that hasn't, like what Kathy said, hasn't been reflected in our country's history, in our city's history. That's not even the start of our country's, but our city's history. Additionally, to emphasize another point that the commission members meant, like, if you don't say it, I feel like people must not be, canceled or judged because they don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. It doesn't make them any less American. That or like people who don't just identify as American, like I identify as a Moroccan American. What I'm saying, as someone who was raised in Morocco, obviously I have more of, I feel more of a Moroccan than an American, but that doesn't make me any less of an American if I don't stand up and say it. So I guess like that's just my point on it. I don't have any problem with doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Like, if you don't want to do it, just respectfully just sit down and let those who do want to stand up, do their thing. So yeah, I guess like that's just my 2 cents on it. I'm gonna pass it to Reverend Tim.
Thank you, Shay. So I appreciate hearing from everyone and what has been shared so far. It's great to hear the opinions. I think it's good to have a further conversation as we move along into this, to continue this and to think this through more. And it's great to hear even the reminders, how people feel about these concerns. Liberty and justice for all, of course, that's our concern. It's one of the concerns, as well as the question about God. I for myself obviously have no problem with that, but I respect the difference and how some may feel about that. For the liberty and justice for all, that's a good reminder as we say the pledge that that's what we long for America to be. This is the longing for it. That's something we want it to be. And we acknowledge in this commission, the whole purpose of this commission is America's not where we want it to be, liberty and justice for all. That's our ideal. That's what we want to be, but we're not there. And that's part of the reason why we are with our statement, why we have this mission statement to say, as America is not there, this is what our role is to be and to respond so that we are moving towards that. So I even wondered, as a suggestion or thought, is what would like to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then also to read our mission statement as a reminder of this is what we want America to be. We long for America to be this. And as it's not, our mission statement is the response. So that, as we say at the end here, there is equitable opportunities, equal access, we're treated with dignity, respect, and fairness and justice. And just the end of our statement, that's really the whole thing, is we long for these things to happen as a commission, and that's what we're fighting for. So as America is what we want it to be, and it is not there, here is our response, and this is what it may look like. So that's just my thoughts as I think about our pledge and this purpose of this commission, so that we might move together towards what we long for America to be and be part of that. I have no problem with the pledge, but I acknowledge that we are not there, and we are working together as a commission to make that happen. And this last week is a reminder of that, what we're moving towards, what we long for this city to be and America to be. And with that in mind, I'd like to pass it on to Dr. Garcia.
I think, I need to do a little bit more digging into this, but my initial reaction is that the Pledge of Allegiance, even in the school system, is controversial. There are students that it used to be, when you say it, you stand and you turn your face towards the flag, you do it. There are wonderful words in the Pledge of Allegiance. It was approved, I think, in 1892, and 1892, we're talking about probably 32 years after slavery was abolished, I believe. or even it was a little bit, it was, earlier than that. But if you look, if we look, if you look at the words, you examine the words of a Pledge of Allegiance, the question that we have is, we still have significant, significant injustice in our country, inequity, and so historically, I'm just saying. So and there are reference to God. There's a clear separation between state and church. There's no doubt about it. And although I see this as an aim, as a goal, in the future, it's taking too long to really dismantle so many things that are happening in our country. So, in my view, I think that what we need to do, and it should not be a mandate, what we need to do basically, if I were to make a decision today, I know this is a topic for conversation, I would just, if you look at our mission statement, all the words that we really need and the aim, it's in this mission. Why don't we recycle or recite the mission statement in lieu of the Pledge of Allegiance? So that way, it's covered. And basically, the only thing we're replacing, it's more concrete, there's no reference to God, it avoids that problem between state and the church. And then you have, you avoid a problem with people who don't believe in that. The Shane just referring, that means, the reference in the Pledge of Allegiance may not, to God and things that may not mean, it's not meaningful to many people. It's meaningful to a lot of people. It's not meaningful to many people. Revere is different, a lot of diversity in the city, et cetera, et cetera. I think that instead of Pledge of Allegiance, let's read our mission statement. I think it came out very nicely today when everyone read it aloud. Just a suggestion.
I think that's, Chief, did you, it looks like you're raising your hand. Did you not speak? Oh, Dr. Garcia, you forgot to hand off to Chief. I forgot. Yeah, I forgot too. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. Yeah, you go ahead, Chief. Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia. Thank you so much, Chief. And thanks to Madam Chair for bringing up this controversial topic. I personally, I don't have any strong feeling about it, whether we do it or not, but I may understand from this discussion that this may present a problem for others. Other people might object it, may not believe on it. And we are trying to be the voice of everyone. So instead, if we do it, we may impact other people because we are supposed to be the voice of everyone. But I think what reflects who we are is this mission that we spent time to put it together. And that's why this commission has been created for. And I believe that this mission speaks louder than the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would just add my voice to Pastor Team and Dr. Garcia. That's the way I feel about it. I think this mission speaks louder than the Pledge of Allegiance in this commission. Thank you, and I will pass it to Chief Callahan.
Rashid, thank you very much. I just want to say this has become kind of a, I know I'm sitting in the room with some wonderful people, and this has become a very deep and intellectual type conversation and a lot of personal feelings and things like that. And I know we're going to have further discussions about it. From my experience, not every commission or board says the Pledge of Allegiance. I've sat on a couple of boards that do say it in the beginning of a meeting. I've sat on some other boards that don't. Why, I'm not sure, but that's just how some different committees do things. So we can discuss that. And my thought, I've said it before, I'm kind of a linear guy. I've been the routine Pledge of Allegiance. I've never had a problem with it. That's my view. But I think it's something we should have a discussion with, and I've heard some very good alternatives from board members here. Tim had a good reference with both the mission statement and the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Garcia and some others had a good alternative as well with the mission statement and what this board means. So I think this is something we can have a future, more in-depth conversation, and I'm sure we're going to have to peel through many layers to talk about it. And, you know, I welcome the conversation because I think it's something that's very important and fruitful for everyone. And I understand everybody's point of view. Shay, everybody had a good point of view about it. And we have to respect one another's opinion as well as people in the community. But I think it's something we can have a more deep conversation about, and we can make a decision together as a group. And we have to remember the last thing, that we are all Americans, no matter where we come from. We all kind of share the same goals, or try to. And I think with this commission, we can try to do things better, or learn from some of the mistakes that have gone on, and make things more fair and better for everyone. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for your honest and open thoughts.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you all. I think that this is an important conversation. We'll continue to have it, and it models having conversations that aren't always fun and easy, and that we can do it in a way that's respectful, where we can listen, where we can learn from each other. And to me, that's also a part of why we're here, and part of sort of how we're representing our mission statement. So thank you all, and we will have more conversations, especially once we have a director, because then we'll also have another voice to hear from. So thank you. I have a lot of papers of notes here. Okay, the last topic for this evening, for discussion, other than updates or other business, is Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples' Day. So I will give a brief overview, and then again, each of you will have an opportunity to speak. Columbus Day is typically celebrated on the second Monday of October. For those who aren't sure why there's no parade, right, because that's always been something traditionally in this city that has been a big event, is the Columbus Day Parade, is that because of COVID, the parade starts being planned back in February. So because of COVID, that was just off the table, and the city of Boston is not doing any kind of parade either. So that has nothing to do, not having a parade has nothing to do with this conversation tonight. I just want to state that clearly. Again, I'm sure everyone on the commission knows, but in case members of the community are not aware, there is a big movement, both nationally and on a state level, to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day. What's happening in the city this year, if you're not aware, Friday is Italian flag raising. There's a celebration tomorrow at 11:30 on the City Hall Plaza. And this is something that the city has been doing with different cultures for different flag raising events. I thank you, I have a big thing of water. The city is aware that October is Italian Heritage Month, and it is important to celebrate Italian heritage. This city has a long history of Italian Americans. I'm personally an Italian American, and so this is not about taking away from Italians. And we reached out to get some support and guidance of what we could do to celebrate Indigenous peoples. Karu Pish was very helpful in supporting the mayor's office, who's been sort of taking the lead in this kind of planning, so that instead of us just haphazardly putting something together, to reach out, and we got some support and guidance from the Native American Indian Center of Boston. And that we're going to sort of circle back with them mid-October to see what could we do that is respectful, that is not tokenizing, that may involve guest speaker. It's important to have an Indigenous person be guiding us so that we're doing this in an integral way. So these things are happening that I wanted you to be aware of. And by then, we might even have a director who'll be involved. So that's where we're at. And I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity, whether it's to ask any questions or to share your thoughts. I know some of you may be entrenched in this. There was just this past week, last week, late September, at the State House, pretty much the majority is in favor of moving towards Indigenous Peoples' Day. There was no vote. And also yesterday on the 6th, the mayor of Boston signed an executive order making the second Monday of the month in the city of Boston Indigenous Peoples' Day. So I just want the community to know that we are not trying to impose something that is not happening elsewhere, that we're not trying to take away from Italians. It's not about taking away from anyone. It's just about looking at the bigger perspective, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners will speak more about some of the history around Columbus and other thoughts. But that's what I wanted to share to get us going. And I'll hand it to Kathy Reinstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will say, this is, first of all, I was like, we are just ripping off all the Band-Aids tonight. Let's just acknowledge that. I think it's good to have this civility and conversations like this because, to your point, people are very proud of their heritage, and they get very emotional if they think that there is going to be a change that's going to negatively affect. And I think the goal here is, again, it's always inclusion. It's not a game of subtraction. And I just want to just say, Dr. Garcia, I appreciate you. Dr. Garcia and I have had several coffees for several hours, and we've had incredible conversations that have included this topic. So I think I would argue that we agree with most things. I think we have maybe a different way of coming at it. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Dr. Garcia, because I know that you're going to speak on this as well. But I agree with you when we had the conversation about celebrating Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples' Day on the same day is supporting the oppressor and the oppressed. I agree. Because Christopher Columbus, at the very least, is an incredibly polarizing historical figure. Also, though, if we talk about the history of why Columbus Day happened, it was because of a lynching in 1892 of 11 Italian immigrants in New Orleans. And the way the government wanted to react to this, because it was a national horror, was, I believe it was President Harrison, declared Columbus Day as a one-time national holiday. And I believe it was reaffirmed and maybe put, I think it was FDR, who basically made this a yearly celebration. I think there was a lot of probably other prominent Italian Americans that they could have picked, and obviously there was not a lot of research, and I was not involved in that. I'm old, I'm just not that old. And, I think throughout history, we'll see, like, why were these decisions made this way? But October is also Italian American Heritage Month. And I think there is a way to support both Italian American heritage and Indigenous Peoples' Day together. I do agree that Christopher Columbus may have to come out, but I don't think that I'm not an Italian American. I've grown up in this community. Most of my friends are Italian American. A lot of my friends that I grew up with are actually first generation because their parents came from Italy. I always say I'm more Italian than anything because I'm Italian through osmosis and the culture here. But you know, again, I could understand if Italian Americans would feel that they were kind of being canceled here. And I don't think that that's what anyone wants to do. But on the other side, right? I mean, who was here first? Obviously, Indigenous people were here first. And there's a lot of other immigrants that have, you know, throughout the history of this country, undergone horrible atrocities. If we think about Japanese internment during World War II, and we think about all these other things. And why isn't there a holiday for them too? You're right. But I don't think that we should change the recognition of that. I think there's a way that we can recognize both. And I'll just close by saying that you know, we did a good thing actually to make a federal holiday out of Juneteenth to recognize what, you know, to recognize slavery and to recognize all of that and to recognize Emancipation Day and to recognize that. So I think we have to think about these things going forward. And I look forward to the conversation. I look forward to having a civil conversation and you know, hopefully that other people in the community can weigh in a civil way too. I think that that would be great. So do you want me to pass it to someone? Dr. Garcia, I don't want to call you out. Do you want to wait? Do you want me to recognize someone else first?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, I'm going to,
Whatever you feel.
I'm going to recognize you. Is that okay? Because I invoked your name, and I hope that I didn't, I hope that I told the right story of our conversation, because I do appreciate the conversations we've had. Thank you.
I also want to, let me push this a little bit. I also want to acknowledge that, you know, we've been having this discussion, and this is not an easy discussion. It's something that really, you know, it brings a lot of emotion and raises a lot of anxiety when you do talk about these things. If you look, especially when you know, you look at our history, this is something that, you know, it's a long overdue. The recognition of the Indigenous Peoples' Day. That's long overdue. After all, these are people who own this country, this land, let's put it that way. Every single immigrant, starting with England, when they did land here, they found people here. So not to overlook that fact, not recognizing it, it's a huge mistake, especially when you look at the atrocities, barbarity, and land robbing that took place in this country. And we are all here. Some came first, others came after. We have several waves of immigration in this country. So we have cities and towns in the United States, I count them all. We have approximately, I would say, over 500 towns and cities, municipalities that have recognized Columbus Day. And even here in this city of Revere, historically, if you go dig deeper, the Native Americans were here in this city. So, you know, for us to continue to recognize, I know that there is a plan to move away from that tradition. Somebody that came here that brought a lot of disease, committed a lot of atrocities, just, it's there, the history is there, and we don't have to go further. Just go and check. I think it's a mistake, and I think we need to work towards the direction that we establish a Indigenous Peoples' Day. Boston just did it, just made history yesterday. And it's our job as a commission to really continue to advocate for this. With regards to celebrating both days, if we do pick the same day and recognize both traditions, Italian and the Indigenous People Day, that would skew the celebration. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there are people watching us. They are going to say, yes, you are canceling, you are basically celebrating the Italian heritage and the people's indigenous day on the same day, you're skewing the problem. Why? Because basically what you're doing, as Kathy just referred, it's true, you're celebrating the power of the oppressor and those who have been oppressed. So I'm not against celebrating the Italian heritage and culture and so on. I'm not against that. That's actually welcome. Rashid just celebrated the Moroccan, had a Moroccan festival. I want the Hispanic and the Latino group also to celebrate their culture and their ethnicity, their heritage, and so on and so forth. I want my Caribbean fellows to do it. I want the Asian people to do it. That's what makes the diversity of this city. But we cannot continue to ignore people that we have found here who have gone and who have suffered so much in the hands of those who came here, who exploited them, robbed their land, killed them, committed a lot of atrocity, and so on and so forth. I think it's time for us, there's a huge debate at the high school involving high school students. The Equity Advisory Board that I lead at the high school is taking on this issue, and I think we need to be brave enough to embrace this and establish a holiday like Cambridge did, like Boston did, like many other cities in America did, because it's just something right to do. It's a way to celebrate the roots, the culture, the ethnicity of people who are found on this land. They were found here. We came, and therefore they should be celebrated. And they have a lot of things. It's not just a matter of recognizing who they are, their heritage, the culture, the language, and what I have brought to us, but also it's a way also for us to celebrate the resistance, the struggle for social justice, because they were really resilient, these people. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. And I will pass this to Reverend, let's put it, okay.
You'll have to, I just turned his mic off. You have to put your mic on.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. So can we just acknowledge right off the bat here, I really appreciated Kathy and Dr. Garcia back to back, because that is the hope of the conversation that should happen in our city, right? That you guys sat down for coffee, this conversation began there, and then this conversation came to this committee because the two of you thought this through and asked these questions. That's what we want for the city and to have happen here, is that we are talking together and understand what we're missing, what we've not heard or acknowledged, and where injustice has happened to bring that forward. So just, what you said, Dr. Garcia, perfect. I just can't, that much more I can add. I mean, just thank you so much, and thank you, Kathy, too, what you mentioned. I'll just quickly add, I think you said it well, we're all immigrants. That's the acknowledgement of this, and saying that we have to acknowledge if there's injustice that happened here, by making that day to become Indigenous Peoples Day as a way of righting a wrong and not making it at the same time is also important. And I think that's well said, and I think it's something we need to talk about and do and pursue and make happen, as has happened already in Boston, that we are pursuing that. And it's not minimizing Italian Americans, it's not minimizing what has happened to them. And as Kathy pointed out, wrongs have happened to times when they came to our country as well, but it's stepping back and seeing the original story of our country and how, even that we are all immigrants, and that was not acknowledged that this land was taken, and how we respond to that. So I think it's important that this is a moment to step forward as a city. So thank you so much for both of you. Not much more I can add to that, and I'd like to pass it now to Shay.
Thank you very much, Reverend Tim. The first 2 points, or 3 points, I'm not sure, that I'm gonna make are kind of,
Do you mind pulling?
Oh.
I can't really hear.
oh yeah, my bad. The first 2 or 3 points that I'm gonna be making are kind of like, they're not petty, but they're like the nitty gritty stuff. I guess like the whole, how Christopher Columbus, was like, I understand that he was Italian, but he wasn't even, he didn't even represent Italy when he came. He was under the company of Spain. So I'm just like, there's that. Secondly, what is it called? you know, when Kathy said, you know, we're also supporting this oppressor, I don't think we should, that's what I feel like people have been doing for the past, you know, however long we've been celebrating it, and I think we should definitely step away from that. Thirdly doesn't have to do with the nitty-gritty stuff, but I feel like celebrating Italian heritage and Columbus Day should be two completely different things. Because I'll be 100% honest, the only reason why I know of Christopher Columbus, aside from the fact that he came to America and stuff like that, but it's all the stuff that he did when he came here, you know, how he, the way he treated, you know, the natives that he found, you know, how that's just it, you know, how he treated the people who were here before him. And stuff like that, and I feel like that's not representative of the Italian community, especially here in Revere. A lot of my friends are indeed Italian, and stuff like that. So that's like, I feel like that's one huge part. Like I feel like we should if we're gonna celebrate Italian Heritage Month, Italian heritage, it should not be corresponding with Columbus Day, because based off my knowledge of, you know, the struggles that I've been taught in school. Of the struggles the Italians went through had nothing to do with what Christopher Columbus did when he came here. So it's like the struggles that they went through should not correspond with the injustices that he did in America. So I feel like that's one point. Like I feel like those things should be completely separate. Two, this is just like something that a lot of people have said on the commission already, and that's like, the fact that Boston is doing it, the fact that Boston has done it, and we haven't established Indigenous Peoples Day yet, says a lot, and that I feel like we should just indeed go through with it. You know, for the people who are worried about not speaking about Columbus Day or whatever, I meant Columbus on Columbus Day, or like when we get to the point where Indigenous Peoples Day is officially established in Revere, the talk of Christopher Columbus isn't going to be gone and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of the things that anytime Christopher Columbus comes around is like, well, he did a lot of bad things for these Indigenous people. So the talk of the mentioning of Christopher Columbus will never be gone, because with, you know, you can't really go about celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day without addressing this fact that he did a lot of bad things to those Indigenous people. So it's like, if you cut Christopher Columbus away from all that, it's kind of like you're ignoring the fact that he did all that bad stuff to these Indigenous people. You know what I'm saying? We can't just forget that Christopher Columbus was ever in the picture. So I guess that's my 2 cents, and I feel like, you know, yeah. I have nothing else to say. I will pass it on to Chief Callahan.
Shay, thank you. And I want to thank the fellow commissioners. This has been another powerful topic to speak about. And I think it's something that we do have to have some serious consideration. And I just saw today, I believe it was Boston, like it was mentioned by several people here, and some other communities are considering doing it. And I'm not sure if the state is considering doing it as well. I know it's been kicked around for a little bit, and I know it's been talked about in this community for about a year or so. And I think it's something that needs to have some future consideration, because there's a lot of misinformation that's been out there for years, and now things are starting to be corrected, and other historical information's coming up. So I would say this is something we have to speak about as a group and a commission more in depth, and come down to a collaborative decision, and maybe involve others in the city, the mayor and the city council as well, and talk about it and have more of a deep discussion. And I will pass it on to, I believe, Rashid?
Thank you so much, Chief Callahan. This is another controversial topic. Why not? We can talk about it. I believe establishing Indigenous Peoples Day doesn't take anything away from the Italian community. There will be the Italian community, by the way, they will be celebrating the Italian flag in here, and we are all happy about it, and we will attend the event. I think, as many of my fellow commissioners mentioned, that we all immigrants and we all came from somewhere. It's just some people have been here longer than others, or some people may speak the language better than others, or some they may have accent, or others they may not have it. But we are all the same. We are all immigrants, and everyone should be able to celebrate their heritage in here. I have to tell you that I'm so proud to be a resident of this great city for allowing me and my community to celebrate our heritage. The festival has been great, and I appreciate the support of everyone from the commission, all the city departments, the police department, the fire department, the mayor's office. It's been great. And that makes me think, because the way I was appreciated and my culture was appreciated, I start empowering other people, and they really mean it. We start empowering the Colombian community. And everyone have the right to celebrate their heritage. And if you are celebrating the Moroccan culture, you are not taking anything away from other cultures. And I would say, like, if we really believe on this mission, we should be advocating for that. It clearly says it in here, empowering all people of Revere by ensuring that everyone, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized people. So I think all commissioners should be voting for this. And thank you so much, and they will pass it to Kuru.
Thank you, Rashid, and thank you all the commissioners. Dr. Gassios, thank you so much for speaking about this issue so passionately. I also want to acknowledge that Italian immigrants way back then got it worse and bad as well in terms of oppression. I want to acknowledge that. And also the fact is, it's not about celebrating the culture. We're talking about mass murder, right? Who want to glorify like a mass murder? And Columbus was representing Spain. He was supposed to go to Asia and bring the spices back, and he ended up in America. And during his time, he has murdered many indigenous people, and indigenous people have suffered tremendously and generationally until now. And as commissioner, as one of the commissioners, I learned about history, and I don't want to make a mistake again and make another mistake history. It is important to distinguish between cultural celebration and the genocide, right? So I'm all to have that conversation, and at the same time, I strongly supporting to have an Indigenous Day celebration in honor of Indigenous People Day, to honor Indigenous people who have suffered and who had shared wealth and land with us when we came. Thank you. And I am going to pass it on to Lynn Alexis.
Thank you. I have just been listening to everyone, and I'm just nodding my head. I think it's so, I appreciate the passion and the complexity of the way that each of us are, like each voice. And I think that a lot of people come into this discussion are coming from it from different angles. Some people are coming from it from the sense of tradition. So we've always done it this way, you know, this is what we do. Some people are coming from it from history, really looking at what is it that we're celebrating. And I think education is key. Even listening to how Kathy was describing how the celebration came about, I'm wondering maybe if it's mislabeled. So, there, like Karu said, there has to be a distinction between culture and what it is that happened on that day, Columbus Day. So I think a greater discussion is necessary. I'd love to have, city officials, be involved in this conversation to really understand at the policy level, people who are pro and oppose this change, why and what's the heart behind it. Because I feel like there's so many angles. So I think, I think we need to understand what we're celebrating. And, I know that Christopher Columbus is a polarizing character that did, very, nasty things. So if we're talking about a celebration of that day, let's bring the diaries, let's bring some of the things that happened on that day. What are we really celebrating? Is it something that we can relabel, like we mentioned? And I think our experience as Americans are not monolithic. We're, different people. So I think that every culture has to be representative. And if the day of the 10th or whenever is a celebration of taking away land from a group of people, the indigenous, then yes, we need to reconsider. If the celebration is about discovering the land, well, was it discovered and who discovered it? So I think that there's a deeper level of education that has to be presented to the city as a wide. So when, ideas are brought to rename it or change it or to properly allocate it to a certain group of people, people understand why and they understand the heart behind it. And I think that it really needs to be a compassionate conversation like we're having here today, so we can really understand what it is that's going on, and that the heart behind it isn't to cancel a group of people, because essentially that's not what we're doing. I think each and every culture, who have risen up and had the proper celebrations, like Italian Heritage, we're doing that, I think, on the 8th. I think it's not saying that we're not celebrating a subset group, but really looking at the root of what we are celebrating and asking the question, is this representative of who we are as a nation? So yeah, I think, people who have done the research, people who have looked at the situation deeper, let's defer to that. Let's defer to the change and the evolution of it. And, if the city of Boston has taken, the leap, or as a state has taken the leap, let's join together with that. And again, just to understand the heart behind that is to be inclusive and to just allocate the right celebration for the proper day and to know what we're celebrating. Just going real quickly back to the Pledge of Allegiance, I think, a lot of people don't even know like how that came to be. So again, some people are going at it from culture, some people are going at it from tradition, but there's so many angles. So I think we just need to educate everyone and have this and continue to have, conversations so we know exactly what is the root, so people can understand where it's coming from. Thank you. I will pass it to Chief Wright. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. And thank you to all my fellow commissioners, really incredible comments, very powerful. I don't think I have anything as elaborate to add to what's been already said. But I do agree, I think this issue is probably long overdue to be addressed. Again, it's another one of these situations, growing up, we were taught a certain way, but I think now, we know more, we know better. And sometimes when you learn and you evolve and you find out something was done wrong, it's time to right it. And I think this is one of those situations that it's long overdue to be righted. And I would hope that the commission would probably come up with a motion or recommendation. I don't even see why we can't do it tonight, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Bright, and for mentioning that. So this body does not have, we cannot make policy. We cannot decide that the city is going to start to celebrate this. We can, however, have a motion to make a recommendation to the mayor's office and the city council, and if the commission feels they would like to do that, then I would for certainly entertain a motion, and we can take a vote.
I fully support that motion, and I think we should do it today. It would be a strong endorsement of the goal we are envisioning. I agree with the chief that we should do that.
So you're making the motion that we make a recommendation to the mayor's office and the city council that the city move towards changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day. And I see Kathy has her hand up, and I have a feeling what she's going to say is that the state hasn't done this yet, but let me hear what Kathy has to say before we continue with the motion.
Can I just clarify one thing, though, before we go to Kathy? Okay. It's just, regarding your last comment about the state not adopting this. Well, the state has not adopted this, but the city of Boston has done it. There are other ways you can use your mechanism to do this. It does not have to wait for the state. Thank you.
Thank
I'd like
you.
to second Dr. Garcia's motion.
Okay.
I guess I wasn't going to ask that, but I wasn't going to say that about the state. But to clarify one thing, at the beginning of this conversation, we talked a little bit about the hearing at the State House. So just for clarification, so as we know that bill to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day was heard before a committee. The committee considers it. The committee has not even voted on it to make a recommendation. I'm sorry, I'm getting very wonky about it. But I think, too, there's probably a lot of legislators that haven't even weighed in on that. So I appreciate that people came and testified on both sides of that at that public hearing. But, there was a lot of people in favor of it just because there were some people opposed for whatever reasons. I can't speak to anyone else's things, but I think, it hasn't been decided just because there were more people who voiced their opinion one way or the other. But my clarification, I guess I'm asking is, so is our motion to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples' Day? That's my first part of the question. And if that is yes, the answer is yes, what are we doing anything to recognize Italian American heritage?
So Italian Heritage Month is October. Tomorrow is the flag raising. There could be, in the future, we'll have to see what other recommendations we make. There may be bigger festivals, parades, cultural events that celebrate Italian Heritage Month. But my understanding is that we're not here to really discuss that now. We do want to make sure that we're not canceling out any Italian heritage festivities and celebrations.
Thank you. I just want to say, I agreed with everyone who spoke on this. And again, and it was very powerful, and I really appreciated this discussion. And I really do agree 100,000% with everyone's kind of take on Christopher Columbus as a person, 1,000%. However, the premise for that, to call it after that, was to acknowledge Italian heritage. They gave it a name and they put a person in front of it, but it was because they were celebrating Italian American heritage. So I'm not, as Ruben has said to me before, I always come to every meeting with a bag full of wrenches, so I apologize for the wrenches that I've been handing out right now. But I agree that we should celebrate Indigenous Peoples' Day. I agree that it should not be called Columbus Day, but there's celebrations and there's a holiday. So it's just a concern, and I'm also being a little bit of a devil's advocate here, that if we walk away recommending one thing, that you're going to have, yes, it's tradition, it's all those things, but it's also a culture. So I feel like, would people be very hurt that we eliminated I know that most people, when they around here for Columbus Day Parade, for example, no one's in the streets cheering for Christopher Columbus, really. They're in the streets celebrating their culture. So that's my concern, and I think I would say this about any culture. It's not just Italian culture, and I do also appreciate that, you know, indigenous people, they were here first. I understand what happened with Columbus. I couldn't agree more. But I would just like a clarification on what, I just think that there's going to be a lot of pushback on that, and that concerns me about not celebrating both or honoring both if we're going to put it in a motion.
And can I just say this, maybe it'd be helpful, and
Just 1 second, Lynn. I want everyone to be mindful of the time, so that it's already like getting close to 7. We still have a couple of other small items on the agenda. This is an important topic, but we need to sort of clarify where we're at in either making a motion, clarifying what that motion is, if we need to elaborate on it, or if this was the beginning of a conversation that we will continue to have. Go ahead, Lynn.
thank you. And I'm hoping to maybe speak to that. Maybe we can clarify our motion or move in whatever way you just described, Madam Chair. So in hearing what Kathy has to say and all of us as a whole, it seems like there may be some mislabeling. So maybe it's more appropriate to say, okay, since I think maybe Italian Americans have gotten recognized on the same day. So is it more appropriate to relabel the day? So it's Italian American Day, and at the same time recognize Indigenous people. So I just want to let that for reflection, because if putting Christopher Columbus in front of it is the problem, I don't see why that can't be addressed specifically.
What I heard was the concern of celebrating the oppressed and the oppressor at the same time. So that, I think that would be the concern of recommending to change Columbus Day to Italian Heritage Day or Italian American Day or something like that. It's like, what I heard from a number of people is that would be the concern for your suggestion. I guess the question is, do we make a motion that recommends changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day, yet ensuring that Italian Americans are recognized in some way during the course of October? Do we recognize, because considering the history of this community, do we recognize Italian Americans in October and recognize Indigenous people in November during Native American Heritage Month? So those are just thoughts. Go ahead, Karu.
I think, so here's the thing. Yes, we want to acknowledge both, and at the same time, there's known a holiday that attach Columbus name to it, right? It's a national holiday. And regardless you're celebrating the culture or the mass murder, it's a name attached to it. And I think the purpose, if we have the Indigenous Day in November instead of October, why are we doing this? I think the goal here is to decolonize that, right? To undoing the mistake that the history had made. So I strongly supporting the change for Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day in October. And yet, like I said, we are not taking away the cultural celebration of Italian. And if we need to have more conversation after the making the motion to get to make this, to have this recommendation for the mayor's office and for the city councils. I think we should do it today. And I'm also going to ask the fellows, city council, what does it take, what you need, what kind of support, what you need, what education you need to be able to pass this. And I'm asking all of the city councilors.
Thank you, Carew. Mr. Cantor reminded me, he's been supporting our commission. Do we feel we need to get more public input on this before making a motion? So I think that's something to consider.
I got to challenge the chair on that, Madam.
Okay.
I don't think really that's appropriate. I mean, there's a motion on the floor from one of the commissioners, and to ask Mr. Cantor if it's appropriate, he's not our parliamentarian. I think that's, I challenge that.
I think we have a motion that we need to consider. I think this is transforming into a quid pro quo. If you don't give me that, you give me this. Nobody's minimizing, and we want to recognize all the groups in the city. But Columbus Day falls on this coming Monday, which is October 11th. That's a day that we all celebrate. That's the day. So we cannot, I mean, we're postponing it, changing here. We're trying to do things in a way that I don't agree with. This is what is basically being pushed nationwide for recognition. So I'm not against celebrating the Italian Heritage Month, but the Columbus Day, this whole notion, that Columbus has, if we do this, we do the, I don't agree with that approach. I really don't. We have a motion here. I think we should vote on it.
So to clarify the motion is to recommend to the mayor's office and the city council that we change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day, yet we also ensure that Italian Americans are not canceled out, and there is some celebration during the month of October to recognize Italian Americans. Or do you not want that? I'm trying to listen to what everyone's saying, and I'm hearing that it's important. Kathy especially is bringing this up, and many of you others, that it doesn't appear that this is about canceling out. So do we want to include that in the motion so that it's comprehensive, and we're stating that we want to make sure that Italian Americans are still recognized and celebrated during the month of October?
I'll defer to Dr. Garcia, but I think it's clear from all the commissioners' comments that, of course, we don't want to cancel Italian American Heritage Month or the celebration of, the struggles of Italian American immigrants, but this is a horse of a different color. That's all. Thank you.
Why can't we make two motions? Instead of having one motion, two motions, you can do, the motion to celebrate which is a separate motion, because that's the really issue that we have on the table, which is replacing Columbus Day with the Indigenous Peoples' Day. That's the motion that's really on the table. Then we can also do another motion that recognizes the fact that we will also recognize the contribution that the Italians have made in the city, have done, the things that they have brought into the city, etc. I just need to clarify one thing, Tom. So if we're going to raise the flag this Friday, which is tomorrow, so every time we have a group celebrating their culture, are we going to raise a flag? That's a question I have for everyone. So Rashid next year is going to celebrate the Moroccan, culture. She's going to celebrate the Asian culture, whatever. Are we going to raise the flag, or this is raising flag just for one group? Because that raises the equity issue here, whether all groups are properly treated. It raises a big issue here.
My understanding is that many groups, more than just the Italians and the Moroccans, there's also pride flag raising.
Okay, if that's the case.
So it's not just the Italians and the
Okay, good.
Moroccans. There's also a certain responsibility to the community to come forward and let us know if we don't know their culture's history in certain days or months. But this is welcome for all cultures.
I'm fine with that, thank
So
you.
I'd like to amend the motion then, from what Dr. Garcia put forward, if we can amend it, to then add in what we've talked about with Italian-American, celebrating the heritage, and that we acknowledge, as you mentioned, that, while including the original motion. Can I add that amendment to the amendment, to add that in? Is that possible?
So what I heard Dr. and this is what we need to clarify. I'm hearing Dr. Garcia
wants
is
two.
recommending two motions, which is fine. The reason I like amending the first one is because when this controversial topic comes up, it's the canceling out, the tendency to think that we're canceling out Italian Americans is not going to get lost in a separate motion. That's the only, I agree with the importance, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost and come across inaccurately.
Okay, so I will insist, and I will say, just my opinion, that we should make two motions, again, because either way, even if we make an amendment, there will be always those, critical voice in our community that say, you're masking the problem. Basically, we are not. We are trying to acknowledge both cultures. We're not. But there will be people out there trying to say, okay, you make a motion to replace Columbus Day with the People's Indigenous Day. At the same time, you're introducing right there another continuation of the motion, which is basically, celebrating the Italian Heritage Month. So it could be misleading that way. So my suggestion would be make a motion just to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. You pass that motion if it passes, and then approved. And then, if you want, let's make another motion to acknowledge the Italian heritage, culture, whatever you want to call it. So that's where I would do it. Two motions on the table. It's the same thing, just to avoid misleading people or confusing people.
Kathy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's me who kind of muddied this a little more because I was asking for clarification. So, I appreciate that. I think because of the concern of quote-unquote replacing one with the other, I would be maybe more amicable to including both of them together. And I think you could maybe the motion could read, that Columbus Day be replaced with Indigenous People Day, and that the city find another date in October, which is also Italian American Heritage Month, to celebrate Italian American heritage. So you're asking them to do both in one motion, so that both are included and no one would, to the best of our ability, feel that anyone was left out of that discussion or that decision or their celebrations. Thank you.
Chief Wright, since you are my parliamentary advisor,
That was it. So just what Kathy just said is a clarification of my amendment that I was adding. I think you basically said it well, Kathy. I think that's what we're going for. But I want to acknowledge what Dr. Garcia brought up, which is he's proposing two. But I think it's one of the ways that's the other motion on the floor.
but my question is it the discretion of the chair to hear the one motion or the two? Or do I just wait for someone to make the motion? That's my question to you, is my sort of advisor in this parliamentary process. Okay. Okay, so I'm sort of feeling off the energy of when Kathy made that statement, including Dr. Garcia and Carew, and it seemed that the way that was worded was sort of palatable for everyone, which would be a motion to recommend changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day and selecting a different day in October to celebrate Italian Americans.
If we
So-
can just add that says another day in October, comma, that is Italian American Heritage Month.
Yeah, I can
Thank
sort
you.
of put that in parentheses. So if that's the case, then I would entertain someone putting that motion on the table.
That's gonna make me say that again.
Okay.
Dr. Garcia, who made the motion originally? They should.
Okay, I'll make the motion, okay. I'll make the motion to replace Columbus Day with the Indigenous Peoples' Day. At the same time, find another day during the month of October to celebrate the Italian Heritage Month, Day.
Anyone would second?
Seconded.
I'm going to, since this is a complex topic, I'm going to go around. Lynn Alexis, in favor or not?
In favor, thank you.
Chief Callahan?
In favor of the motion.
Vice Chair Shema Hosseini?
I favor the motion.
Reverend Timothy Bogertman?
I favor the motion.
Chief Chris Bright?
Aye.
Kathy Reinstein?
Aye.
Rashid Mukabir?
In favor.
Dr. Lorenzo Garcia?
I support the motion.
Karupit?
Aye.
Okay, and I also support the motion, so we're all in favor. So as we're coming to an end, we promise this last thing is very quick. Thank you all. So for those of you that don't know what REMAP is, it's Racial Equity Municipal Action Plan, and it's underneath the, I think, the Metropolitan Action Planning Council. So Ruben Cantor is a member of the REMAP team, and he just has a quick update, and basically he's informing us of something to come.
Thank you, Chairman Mara. So Dr. Garcia and I are both members of the Racial Equity Municipal Action Plan team that the mayor has put together. We are in the last few months of trainings and putting together some initial plans. And I just want to let the commissioners know that we're going to be sending out a survey individually to each of the commissioners, and we would appreciate it if you would take a look at that survey and respond. That's pretty much the entirety of my update.
And you'll be sending that by email. Thank you. So just keep an eye out for an email from Ruben Cantor to give your input on this survey, which will help the REMAP team. Any other business?
I do, Madam Chair. I had a question. So I'll maybe defer to you to see if I'm able to talk.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you, Lynn?
I just wanted to make sure that you were just allowing me to
Yes.
to speak.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I noted that the title of the director changed, and I was just asking for a little bit more clarity on the decision as to why, because I think that equity is a big part of what we do. So I'm just not sure if you could, whatever you could say on that would be helpful.
Honestly, I only know that the word equity was challenged by the city council. I was not at that meeting, so I do not know the details. If somebody else was at that meeting and wants to share any perspective, knowing that this is just coming from someone's perspective and observation. So I know that it was challenged, and it was for those involved in the process of putting the position into the budget and planning for posting the job and interviews. It felt that since the job description itself was not changed, the duties were not affected, nothing was changed at all. It felt more important to move forward to get someone in place rather than spend another month or 2 or 3 arguing about a term that would then have delayed the process. Also, Chief of Staff Kim Hanton did some research across the state to make sure that this was not something that was happening just in our city. And she found that when she looked up these different titles, some of them were diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some were just diversity and inclusion. They had all different variations. And so that was also another consideration, that this wasn't something that just Revere was not using that word. So that's what I can share. If anyone else wants to add anything. Go ahead, Karu.
Thank you, Lynn and Alexis, for asking that questions. And my take on this is that through our mission, we also talk about equity. And I think the title make a huge difference. Thank you. The title itself says a lot about this position. Is there an opportunity to revisit that with the counselors?
Yeah, I would think you'd have to have someone from the council, obviously, who voted in the affirmative, revisit it to bring it back, I would imagine. You know, in the end, I agree with Madam Chair, the title would not be as important as the function, getting this person in place to do the important work we need to do. That's more important than delaying it another, 3 months to argue over the word, even though we may like that word to be included in the title.
Thank you, Chief Bright. Dr. Garcia.
I also raised that question, but then upon clarification, I would rather have it included in the title because it's more holistic, you know exactly what you're looking for. But at the same time, if you do read the job description, the content, the substance, as long as it translates that sentiment, we know that the person is really working toward that. I think that's important. Rather than, I'm just afraid that if we back and forth with the council, we may delay the process. So as long as those things are well substantiated in the job description, I think that's what matters.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. And, okay, go ahead, Vice Chair Shea.
Sorry, I'm gonna make this quick. I think we should put equity in the job title, only, I'm not gonna call myself a normal human being, but as someone who doesn't have time to read everything, I wouldn't read the job description if I didn't already know what it was. So having equity in the name, kind of puts responsibility on that person outside from the duties that that is explicitly mentioned in the job description. So if that person isn't living up to those standards, they could be held accountable because they have equity in their name. You know what I'm saying? And stuff like that. So I just think it just makes sense to do so.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I heard what Chief Bright said, which it's not just the words in the job description, it's also the actions that this director takes. So I would humbly suggest that why don't we see who gets into the position? Let's see if this needs to be revisited. One of the sort of strategies that came up at our training is that we want to have a partnership with the City Council. We want to invite them so that we can have conversations, so that we can work together, understand each other, help each other. We do not want to be adversarial here. We're all here to make the city better. So since that's something we're looking to sort of pursue and invite the City Council, that may be a starting point of help us understand what happened with that word, and that might be a nice first conversation for us to understand better. So unless someone opposes, I would say, why don't we just see how things go and know that this is something we can absolutely revisit if needed. Is that reasonable?
Yes, thank you.
Any other business? Okay. No other business noted. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I?
Second.
No,
Who seconded that?
no, Dr. Garcia second.
Okay.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Lynn, raise your hand. Lynn
Aye.
Alexis is raising her hand, okay. Meeting is adjourned. We meet again, excuse me. Oh, thank you to the translator, always helpful, so valuable. Thank you to Ruben. Thank you to all of you. This was really a very powerful and productive and not easy meeting, but this is why we're here. We will reconvene in November 4th for our monthly meeting, and I believe there also will be a subcommittee meeting on cultural holidays and celebrations, so continued discussions then, I believe the third Thursday in October for those on that subcommittee or for those who are interested in the public. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Okay, so please, for a moment, I just want to give you